Welcome to this edition of Elder Care Answers. Elder Care Answers provides valuable information for senior citizens and those who love them, so we can all be more informed consumers.
Hello and welcome to Elder Care Answers, a show dedicated to finding the answers to our elder care and estate planning questions. I'm your host, Ellis Cannon, and joining me is Doreen Seaman of Seaman Law Offices. Doreen is licensed to practice law in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, where she focuses her practice exclusively in elder law and estate planning. She is also an accredited attorney with the VA. Doreen, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. We have a lot to talk about, very important matters for people, whether they are maybe aware of it now or not, but I think when we get done, they certainly will see why. Let's talk a little bit about your experience in helping people make decisions. You've had in your team a lot of experience.
I've been doing elder law since 2007. I've had my own practice since 2008. In that time, we've worked with well over 1,000 families as they work through their estate planning and elder law journeys.
Yeah, and that's obviously a big number, and it's great that that experience is there and available for people. And I was really surprised. Recently I picked up an article that said that less than half, I believe, of Americans actually have an estate plan. I mean, you almost think that you just assume people do that, but not so much.
Right. People always think they have more time, or they often will say to me, well, my family just knows what to do. But, you're an attorney too. Just because they know what you want doesn't mean they have the legal right or authority to do what you want.
Right.
And sometimes that gets a little bit blurred anyhow, what you really want, right?
Right. That's a great, what you want and what you need are two different things sometimes.
True.
And
Absolutely.
in this space in particular. I guess that leads me to why people take so long, or procrastination pops into my head.
Yeah, people procrastinate. A lot of people think that if they plan, they're giving up control. If I appoint somebody as my agent under my power of attorney, then I'm giving them a power, meaning I'm losing control. But that's really not what happens. If I don't appoint somebody as an agent under my power of attorney and I need one, then somebody else has to figure it out, and that's going to be a court.
And then again, then you leave it to the court.
Yeah, right. They'll do their best.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's what I would have wanted.
Exactly. That's a very important thing. And really, a viewer needs to know, to create or updating an estate plan is very important because things have changed over time. And there are questions of who should get the property and how that process begins. I guess I would say that there's tremendous peace of mind in putting together a well thought out, honest, coordinated plan, particularly when you have your all your senses about you. But, when is it a good time to plan, and when is it maybe too late, or is there such a thing?
Well, the best time to plan is as you become an adult. Now, I realize an 18-year-old often doesn't have assets, but if an 18-year-old has an accident and doesn't have capacity, then they can no longer make their own medical or financial decisions, and somebody needs to be able to do that for them. And then you update it, and your plan will change over time. I've worked with people that I've known for years now, and some funny things started happening as they became alone and isolated, where the helpful neighbor was now bringing them to the appointment, and now that person was being put in place. And there definitely sometimes a red flag when all of a sudden that trusted child is the bad guy, and this new person comes in. So it helps us to know what's important to you, who your family is, what the dynamic is. So when those things start happening, we can help try to protect you a little bit.
Yeah, having a background in psychiatry may be a little bit helpful.
I feel like I may have one.
Yeah, right. I mean, you've seen so many different things. Let's talk about planning for incapacity now that you mention it. And powers of attorney are just so essential. What are they?
Well, a power of attorney, there's two types. So first we have the medical power of attorney, which a lot of people are familiar with for all your medical type of decisions. The other one is for non-medical decisions. So you might hear it referred to as power of attorney, statutory power of attorney, durable power of attorney, but it all comes down to appointing somebody to serve as your agent and giving them explicit powers to do or not do certain things.
All right, well, wait a second. I'm thinking, as you're speaking, what about a last will and testament? Doesn't that do that for you?
I get that a lot, but a last will and testament is not effective until you pass away. So your power of attorneys control your decisions while you're living and you're unable to take care of your own matters. And then it basically dies with you, and then the will becomes the operating agreement.
Okay, I understand. And I just keep going back to what I call acute circumstances because we just never know. And in that scenario, if you don't have things in place, I think that it can become terrifying for everybody around you. What are we going to do? How do we pay? I mean, all these different things that come in. It sounds like it'd be frantic. And so for people that are healthy now, I think it's about really being mindful of that acute circumstance. It's nice to feel like you're going to live forever and Teflon, but I think that that's the key.
And so often I'm sitting there with the loved ones and they say, well, why would dad have left this mess for me? Why wouldn't he have taken care of these things? You know, and they're befuddled because they just don't know how to help or what decisions to make. Sometimes they have no idea of what assets we're dealing with. And it's a lot of pressure. And if you think about it, a lot of children are maybe that sandwich generation where we have our parents, we're still working, and then we have our kids or grandkids that are relying on us. So there's a lot going on when you're trying to help a loved one through these processes.
And that's when everything is working right.
Yes.
And you know, again, I'm not trying to put too much fear into this, but I do think it's very important for people to understand that when these things happen, you know, the dynamics change so dramatically. And if you didn't expect it, that could lend itself to, you know, I think a much more troublesome experience. So who do most people choose to be their agent when they do a POA?
So most of my clients choose a family member. So if their spouse is healthy, they'll probably pick their spouse, and then they usually will pick children. But sometimes people don't have people in their family that would serve well in that role, and they might pick a professional such as an attorney, CPA, a trust department at a bank.
Okay, that's very good. Yeah, I've seen that done over the years as well. So what about updating these documents?
It's important to update them. For example, both West Virginia and Pennsylvania in the past decade have adopted the statutory power of attorney, which was a substantial change in power of attorney law in those two states. So your document should be updated to get the newest wording. I belong to a collaboration of attorneys across the country, so I get an email saying, hey, in Idaho, this case happened, and now we're all suggesting we change the wording to this way. And then, you know, we start changing how we do things. So it's good to keep in touch and update from time to time, revisit decisions, remove people that maybe no longer are willing and able to serve as an agent, and bump up the next person or replace them.
I once heard that it's a valuable tool to do it once a year, like on New Year's Day. Pull it out and take a look at everything.
Absolutely. It's good to, you know, a lot of times when people are getting their taxes ready, it's a good time to look at all of those decisions. We usually recommend people come in every 2 to 5 years, or if any major changes happen in their family or retirement.
Well, you know, and there is something called enhanced powers, and of course, when you start talking about that, it gets pretty complicated. That's why you're there. But self-dealing, unhealthy beneficiaries are obviously additional elements. But if I'd ask you, you know, give me a couple provisions that you feel are absolutely important to have, what would you suggest?
Well, that's a great question. So, as I said, most people pick a family member to be their agent. So if your family member does a good job and they're likely an heir of your estate, then if they do a good job, then you'll inherit more, right?
Right.
So they call that self-dealing. So if I said to you, do you want your agent to be able to self-deal? You say no, right? But they are self-dealing, because if they do a good job for you and then you pass away, then they're going to inherit more of your estate. So it has to have, we tie it up, you know, so that we don't want them to go crazy and take advantage of you, but they do have a duty to you to do what's best for you. But by doing what's best for you might directly or indirectly benefit that person. And so we have to word that very appropriately. We also want to make sure that if we need to gift assets out of your name to protect them, in a trust or to give them to an individual, that we have the appropriate wording without constraints on that, like the $16,000 annual gift tax exclusion. We need to have the right wording for that.
Yeah, the wording is so important in these documents. Let's move for a couple of minutes to the last will and testament I referenced earlier in probate. Give us the 101, that's what I call it on this, not just the basics, but what people ought to know in terms of the will, its limitations, its value, what is probate, how do these things all work together?
Okay, so when you die, when a person dies, their last will and testament and death certificate are recorded with the county. And that's public record. And so anybody can read the will, and then they can see the assets that go through that will and who's going to receive those assets. So I'd say the biggest misconception is that any of this is private. So a will is a public type of process. It also takes quite a bit of time. In West Virginia, we can do it for really quick, maybe in 5 to 7 months. Pennsylvania takes longer. It's more complicated. I definitely see where my clients in Pennsylvania are much more motivated to try to avoid that whole process because it is more work in Pennsylvania.
Well, if they wish to avoid probate, and it's interesting that the jurisdictions are different, let me point that out in terms of time, but if a person wishes to avoid probate, what's the best way to do that?
Well, you know, when you're married, it's a little bit easier because you can just own assets jointly. So if your spouse passes away, the surviving spouse owns things. And then when I have a single person, they start to add kids' names, and that gets really confusing, exposes it to liabilities. So the cleanest way and most efficient way to avoid probate is with a revocable living trust.
Okay, well, we're going to get to that in just a moment. That's another important element. So now, after hearing about consideration regarding powers of attorney and various types of trust, we understand the importance of having a comprehensive, big word there, very important, estate plan with the guidance of an estate planning attorney who also focuses on elder law. When we come back, Doreen will explain the different kinds of trusts when Elder Care Answers return. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody, to Elder Care Answers, a show that explains how to prepare for your elder care and estate planning journey. Doreen, let's pick up with revocable living trusts. What are they?
Well, a revocable living trust is a trust used to avoid probate. Any trust avoids probate, but this one allows the person creating it to maintain ownership and control of the assets they choose to put in the trust.
Now, this may sound silly because that's plain language, but why is that so important to maintain control?
Well, a lot of people, maybe because they're young and healthy, they want to have that control. They could buy or sell their home. They could put a car in or not put a car in their bank accounts. So yeah, generally my clients who are younger are very interested in that, and they like the idea that because it avoids probate, that if they have maybe minor children, that this estate will be settled quickly and the money would be available to take care of them more easily. And
we've previously have spoken about irrevocable. That's a different circumstance altogether. Yeah. You can't go back with that one.
Right. Irrevocable is generally for some other purpose, such as avoiding taxes or protecting your estate from the high cost of care.
So I want to ask about when you create a revocable living trust, you name a successor trustee in addition to the trustee. How does that work out?
So for example, my husband and I have had a living trust for a couple decades. We both own it together. We're co-trustees. He can sign, I can sign. If I lost capacity or passed away, he would be the sole trustee. If he also was unable to take care of the trust, then it would fall to our successor, and they would just step right into place and serve as the successor trustee. They give notice to the bank or whoever they needed to deal with.
There's a reason, I guess, it's called planning.
Yes.
Because you want to be able to identify the appropriate person that would be in that line of succession.
Exactly, yes.
And can't that person say, I'm going to pass? I mean, just because they're in that line doesn't mean necessarily that they automatically move in if they don't want to do it.
Exactly. So I have 3 kids, so that's easy. Boom, 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 right? But let's say I had a smaller family, or maybe I wasn't sure if somebody I wanted to do it would be ready, willing, and able when and if the time came, and I had a short list. Maybe I'd put a bank or some professional after that person,
Sure.
so that if they want to decline, they know I'm taken care of. But we also have provisions in our trust that say, hey, we don't have anybody that can serve in this list of people, and we have a way to have somebody appointed without having to go to court, because if you have to go to court, that's going to be more expensive and time consuming.
A trust seems like a big deal. I mean, I'm just talking like for Joe Lunch out there,
Yeah.
because, you start hearing about trust, and, it's a big commitment, whether it's the revocable or irrevocable. What happens in the revocable circumstance you change your mind?
Right. Well, because it's revocable, you retain the right to amend it whenever you want. You can change it. You could throw it away. You could say, I don't want this thing anymore. I revoke it. So it's really not a big commitment. It's pretty easy. And generally, you're going to pay more money for a trust than a will because it's a more complicated document. But then it's going to save time and money later when you become incapacitated or when you pass away. So the payoff is later. I've had clients say, I don't have a lot to put in my trust, but I want to make things easy for my child. I'm thinking of this as a gift for my child.
Okay, so when I think back, and you've talked about Pennsylvania, West Virginia, the differences in the timelines that this process moves along. Do you find that because Pennsylvania seems to operate a little bit with a longer timeline, that was polite, a longer timeline, that people have more of an interest in PA with the revocable?
I'd say so. I see a little more interest in the revocable living trust in Pennsylvania than West Virginia. It's still a great fit for many of my West Virginia clients, but I have noticed in Pennsylvania they're a little bit more interested in that because they've seen people go through a long probate process and they just rather not.
Right, indeed. All right, I want to get to special needs trusts in just a moment, but one last point. Revocable, irrevocable. Does revocable allow you to protect assets?
No.
That's very important for people to know. Right.
Exactly.
That's only through irrevocable.
Yes.
Right. All right, so let's talk about special needs trusts. How did that come about? How often do you see that? And for that matter, give us some explanation on what that specifically means.
Okay, so special needs trust or supplemental needs trust, okay, kind of the same thing. They're for the benefit of a person with a disability. So for our viewers out there, if you know of somebody that has a disability and you're going to gift them money or give them an inheritance, you always want to let your attorney know so they can put the proper provisions in your will or trust to transfer that property to them.
Okay.
If you don't, then it's not going to work out quite as well for that person. It's going to affect their benefits.
Okay, so let me ask you then, let's talk about how a special needs trust, SNT, I guess it's referred to as, how it works, how it could be used, who manages it, some of those details and specifics.
Okay. So like our other trusts, we're going to appoint a trustee. Now, I do often see people appoint professional trustees for SNTs because they're a more complicated animal, and it's a little difficult for just a general lay person to completely understand how to manage a trust and how not to mess up somebody's Social Security and Medicaid benefits. So when I see professional trustees in a family, it's often with an SNT. But the SNT has to comply with the rules that the government has set up for us for Social Security and Medicaid. So sometimes people say to me, well, I don't want an SNT because I don't want to control how this person can spend the money. The trust is just complying with the laws that we don't like.
I understand.
So you need that, but if a person who is on a needs-based benefit like Social Security and you hand them a chunk of money, then they have to report that as income, and then the following month it's an asset, and then they lose their benefits.
Again, the specifics are where the details are, and the details are where you need to be in this field. And if you're, in fact, looking again to upgrade, review, or build a plan, all of these come into play. All right, let's keep rolling through these trusts, Doreen. Testamentary trusts, what's the deal with them?
A testamentary trust is basically a trust that your will or your living trust creates for the benefit of somebody. So if I said give my estate to my children in trust, that trust that comes out of my will is a testamentary trust created by my last will and testament.
Okay. Can you have this type of trust for adult beneficiaries?
Yes, yes. So that's commonly where I see, you know, my child's 50 years old and he still can't make his budget, and I'm helping him all the time. I'm giving him his inheritance and trust.
Okay, so what type of examples would you have quickly on how people choose to design this particular trust?
So they might give that child full right of withdrawal. They just want it to be in a trust so that if the child would pass away, the proceeds then would go to the next generation. They could give them income only. It could be used for health, education, maintenance, and support. It could be released at certain ages.
All right, so let's talk again about another trust, and that would be giving gifts during a grantor's lifetime, meaning the grantor.
Yeah.
Okay, so education in particular.
Yeah, so often I'll see grandparents say, I want to create an educational trust for my grandchild, and we can do that as well. So they could do a 529 plan, they can do an educational trust, but there are a lot of different trusts for different purposes. So that would come down to the goals that the client has, and we can work them through that.
And I don't want to say that these are all relatively straight line, or because they all have their own need to be customized for people. But now when we start talking about the next trust, asset protection, this is when it's a different game.
Right. So the asset protection trust is for somebody who is worried about losing assets or going broke if they need to go into nursing home care.
I got to tell you, you've used the word broke, and it jumps out when you do, because it's not the most legal term, but
No.
it is incredibly accurate, and it's, I think, one of those things that people have a fear of, and they need to address it. I mean, because going broke is a real deal.
Yeah, and I guess I use that term because I've heard it so much. That's like I've told you, when clients sit down at my conference room table and I say, why are you here? What are your goals? I often hear is, I don't want to go broke in a nursing home. So in my mind, people don't want to go broke in a nursing home, and I need to help them figure out a plan to avoid that in the best way possible.
They know it. They may not know how to act on it, but that's why we're doing the show, so they can get to you. Just real quick then, why is this trust such a popular tool?
Because of that concern, and because, you know, we've all worked so hard for everything that we have. And so if there's any way to get a better advantage, then most people are interested in at least learning about that option. It's not the perfect option for everybody. It has to have the right set of circumstances, the right type of assets, but it is a very popular tool, and it's one people want to understand, whether they decide to use it or not.
Right.
But it's their option.
And you can certainly direct them with taxes and all that comes with that particular trust.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about veterans benefits, another place that is very much in your wheelhouse, service-connected disability. And let's start with that. And specifically, veterans, I understand they need to have good powers of attorney as well. Is that correct?
Right. We all need powers of attorney. And for the service-connected disability, that's going to be somebody who is basically injured, wronged, or harmed through their service. They now have a disability. It may not have appeared for years. We're seeing Vietnam veterans who have service-connected benefits that are available to them. So it could be something you were born with that was dormant, and because of your service, it was triggered. So it wasn't something that happened to you, but because you served. So there's a lot out there and a lot of confusion. And one thing that I've seen is some service members were denied their benefits, and they feel uncomfortable now talking about it. But I would say to our viewers, if you think that perhaps you should have been qualified, that would be a time to reach out to an accredited attorney or agent to see if maybe that could be looked at again, and you could actually get back pay from when you were originally applied.
Well, that's very valuable, and obviously we want to help the vets in any way possible, and these all tie together for the reasons we've talked about. I'm thinking to myself that PTSD could be the type of thing that pops up later. And with that in mind, if a veteran believes that he or she has a disability going back to service and they're having issues getting approved, I'm assuming you can help them out.
Right. Right. What we'd like to do is explore the records with them, get their story, find out what's going on, why they were denied originally, and then we can go back and decide whether it makes sense to reapply and try to get that for them.
And that's a process as well.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a process. It's not going to happen overnight, unfortunately.
No, but it is important. And I have to ask, if they weren't disabled due to their service, is there still something that could be done to help them along?
Yes. So there's a pension that will reimburse a veteran or his spouse if they need care and their insurance isn't paying for it. So that irrevocable trust that we've been talking about, the VA has a 3-year look back for that. So I've had clients that we've done that trust for. They've been on the VA for pension for over a decade. They've gotten $100,000 in this pension. So you pay the caregiver, the VA reimburses you up to a certain amount, it's not unlimited, per month for paying that caregiver. So I've had some people in nice assisted livings that are getting this monthly pension, and they couldn't afford it,
Right.
but for the pension.
I'm glad I asked that, because that is a very valuable tool for folks, and particularly with the shorter look back as opposed to others that could be longer. All right, so what's the best way to reach you?
You can call either office. Leave a message if nobody is there. If it's we get a lot of calls at night, as you can imagine. People, that's when they have the time. We'll call you back the next day, or go to our website. You can go to the chat that has a real person on the other end of it, or you can ask for a client intake specialist appointment. There's a button there where you can make a 15-minute appointment with our specialist who will help you figure out if we're a good fit.
Yeah, and I guess people, once they make a decision they want to get involved, they want that to happen. Is there basically a timeline you can give people in terms of what to expect?
Yeah, usually it takes us about 6 to 8 weeks from beginning to end of working with somebody. We are very systematized at our office, where when you leave our appointment and you want to work with us and you engage us for services, you'll know when your documents and plan will be ready. So sometimes clients say, hey, I have a lot going on. I don't want to do it quite that quickly. But otherwise, we give ourselves an immediate deadline, and we work towards that deadline.
Oh, that's excellent. That's a great service, and the process really sounds quite easy. Doreen certainly has given us a lot of helpful information today. So now you can get help building the foundation of your estate plan by contacting Doreen's office directly, as she pointed out just moments ago. Or you can also visit, again, their website at SeamanLawOffices.com to request an appointment, to watch more of our television shows, or to find other resources to help with your estate plan. Be sure to listen to their podcasts as well, and follow Seaman Law on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Once again, everybody, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Elder Care Answers.